We're now on Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis, finishing up the Mishnah. Ad Yomav Hayapatish Makav Yerushalayim. They allowed a what's called a Meleches Davra Avud on Chol Hamoed, and you would hear the hammer banging. But at the time of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, they abolished and they prohibited this practice. V'yomav ein tzarich lishal al d'mai, and it was not necessary to inquire regarding d'mai. He legislated that purchases of d'mai have to give mas. The Gemara says, "Pan Rabbanan minayin she'im nerfa ha'egla v'achkach nimtza horeg." How do we know that if after the arifa we find the horeg she'in poter, so the kapar power of the egla rufa does not absolve the murderer and he will be put to death? Talmud Lomar, it's based on a pasuk in Bamidbar. It says, "Chafei bila arz lo yichupa ledam asher shubach ba ki im b'dam shovcha." The land will not have atonement for the blood that was spilled in it, except through the blood of the one who spilled it. So the egla rufa does not affect any kapar for the murderer, and therefore, once the murder is identified, not only that, it no longer affects atonement for the townspeople either, since the matter is no longer of uncertainty, but rather it's one of certainty. The Mishnah says that Eid Echad Omera Isi Esa Horeg, and another witness contradicts him and says, "You did not see him." They went ahead through this Hakosha and they went back to be orphan, time of the Makishle, only because the second witness contradicted the first one, and therefore disqualifies the first Eid Halo Makishle. If there was no Hakosha, Eid Echad Mehemnin, one witness would be believed to say that I could identify the murder, and therefore there's no Egla Rufa. What's the basis for this? The pasuk says that no one knows who killed this person, this slain person. And the implication is on Nodamiko, if somehow there's some sort of a knowledge, as remote of a knowledge that it is, there's one person somewhere on the other side of the earth who can identify the murderer. He was not present to testify in the Bezdin, but somehow the Bezdin is aware of the fact that there's someone out there who knows the identity of the murderer, even though that person is not here to testify. Then there's no arifas ha'egla. Lo ayu orf. Rabbi Akiva Omer Minayin l'sanedrin sharosh echad shaharagas hanefesh v'ein makirino. So they saw the murder, but they cannot identify the murderer. They couldn't see who he was. Shaloya orphan. That's enough to remove the egla rufa, because they saw the murder, even though they can't identify. And that's a separate halacha in Sanhedrin. Talmud Lomar v'einenu lo ro, follow ro. When do we bring the egla rufa? That's because our eyes did not see, but they did see. What I'm not sure is, how do they know they saw this particular slain person? I mean, Chashol, maybe there was another murder. I don't know. In any event, so we established that the Torah believes one witness who says that he can identify the murderer, and that takes off and removes the mitzvah of egla rufa. Hasha de Amrei Echad Mehemon Ido Chad Hechi Motzi Makashela Omer Ula Kol Mokum Shamina Torah Echad Arekan Shnayim V'Ein Dvar Shel Echad B'Mokum Shnayim. This is a Gemara that we had already back on Daf Lamed Aleph, that once we upgrade the status of an Eid Echad to believe him as if there were two Eidim, then if somebody comes later to be Makashim, he's like one Eid against two witnesses. Omelcha Ula says you have to change the girsa in the Mishnah. Lo hayu orfim. When the second aid says you didn't see, that's dvar shalech b'makom shnayim, and therefore we believe the first aid, like two aidim, that he saw and he could identify the murderer, and therefore there's no arifa. V'chein omer Rab Yitzchak, tni, we should change the girsa of the Mishnah. Lo hayu orfim. But Rab Chia Amar tni hayu orfim. he accepts the text of the Mishnah the way we have it, that there would be Arifas Egla. So Reb Chia Kasha di Ula, we have Ula's difficulty, namely, we accepted the first aid as if he were two Eidim, and therefore the second aid is Eid Echad V'Vakom Shnaim Lo Kasha. Kan V'Vasachas, Kan B'Zecher Zeh. Ula was talking about a case where it was B'Zecher Zeh, and once we accepted the first aid, we upgraded him to the status of Shnei Eidim. Whereas Rabbi Chia is talking about a case of a Vasachas. And if the two Eidim came Vasachas, one cancels the other, and we don't apply the principle of Ula. Tonight we learned in that Mishnah Echad Omer Isi Es Ahore. Ushnayim Omrim Lora Isa. So the implication is that Ochad V'chad, if the second aid was only one aid and not two witnesses, Lo Hayu Orphan. They would not. Now, the assumption is that this is a case of Bazecher Zeh. To the Rabbi Chia, we see that we apply the principle of Ula Kol Mokum Shemina Torah Kan Shnayim even in a case of Bazecher Zeh. So the Gemara asks Tameche Maseifa, according to your reasoning, how are you going to understand the Seifa? Shnayim Omrim Ra'inu, V'yed Echad Omer Lo Ra'isem, Lo Hayu Orphan. So let's apply the same diuk in the Seifa. That the reason why there is no Arifa is because, one second. Right, it's because one witness was contradicting two witnesses. So we accepted two witnesses, Ra'inu, and therefore there's no Arifa. So the diuk should now be Ochad V'chad. Let's say that the original testimony that we saw the witness was only one witness instead of two, then are you orphan? Then we would have Arifa. Now that can't be, because we just finished saying that in the Reisha, if it was one against one, then there would not be an Arifa, because the Hakosh would be Chal if it was Bevasachas. We have to take an entirely different approach to interpret the Mishnah. We're talking about Psuli Edus. And this reflects the Shita of Rabbi Nechemia. The Omar Rabbi Nechemia said, Kol mokum shemin Torah echad halach acharov deos. That means that if we're talking about a case of a single witness, and if this witness is disqualified in general for Edus, we'll accept that witness. But nevertheless, we accept the word of the majority of those who testify. And that's called halacha charov deos. They considered two women who contradict one man, kishnei anoshim v'ish echad. So in other words, when we apply the principle of Rabbi Nechemia of halacha charov deos, so then once we accept the testimony of Noshim, then Shtei Noshim V'ish Echad is 2 against 1. And therefore, that one witness, who in this case a man, will be overruled and disqualified by the 2 Eidim Psulim, meaning the 2 Noshim, because halacha charov deos. So the Mishnah teaches first that if one witness says he saw the murder, 2 witnesses say he did not see him, then we go ahead with the Arifas Ha'egla, Why? Because we're going to go Basar Rov Deos. And there are two witnesses that said he did not see them. Then the Mishnah teaches us, if two witnesses say that they saw the murder, and they know who the murderer is, one witness says they did not see him, then there's no Arifa. Right? Even though the original witness is possible, it doesn't matter because Rav Nechemiah's principle of Azalina Basar Rov Deos. Ika di Amri. However, there's another transmission of Rav Nechemiah and the understanding of our Mishnah. Kol heichad yaseh echad kasher meikar. If the first aid was an aid kasher, is afilu mea noshim ki echad damyan. If 100 witnesses who are possible edus come, we consider them as one witness. So Reb Nechemiah's rule that we follow majority, as Lina Basar Rov Deos, does not apply if there was one single aid kosher who came first, and if he's contradicted by Eidim Psulim later. Because once the aid Echad kosher testifies, he, through Ula, is considered like Shnei Eidim. Either a numerous invalid witnesses who oppose him, they are equal to one valid witness. And then we apply the principle of Kol Echad Shemina Torah Echad Rekan Shnai Vein Dvarim Shel Echad Mokum Shnai. So what's the case in that Mishnah? The first aide who testified that she knows the identity of the murder was a woman, and now two Eidim Psulim contradict her. And in this case, even though the single witness was accepted by the Beis Din, nevertheless we follow Rov Deos because the original witness was Pasal Yedus, was an Isha, and she came Eikara. And now we interpret Rabbi Nechemiah this way. Rabbi Nechemiah Omer kol makom shemin Torah echad alachach Rov Deos v'asu shtei noshim v'isha achas kishnei anoshim v'ish echad. So if it's shtei noshim v'isha achas, it's like shnei noshim v'ish echad. They're all psuli edus, and therefore we count deos, and it's two deos against one. Aval shtei noshim v'ish echad, if the original aid who testified was a man who's kashali edus, and therefore we upgrade him to the status of two edim, and now two women who are psuli edus contradict him, ki palgu dami, it becomes like half and half. V'tarte psuli edus lomali. So the Gemara asks now, if you're talking about an aid puzzle, so why do I need two, the Reish and the Sefer, two repetitive rulings involving witnesses that are disqualified? Mal de Taimai would have said, Ki azlina basar rov deis lechumra, v'lekula lo kamash malan. So the Mishnah wants to teach me that we go basar rov deos, not only lechumra, which means that we have to go through the arifa seva, like egla in the first case, but even in a case of lekula where we suspend the arifa egla. So when the majority says that the murder was seen and identified, they are exempt from arifa egla. And we would have had a havamina, let's give credence to the minority because you're being makil. And that's what the Mishnah says, no. Even lekula, to do away with arifa egla, we will go basar rov deos. The Mishnah says, Misharoru amrotzchim, and then they abolished the egla rufa, tan rabbana, Misharoru arotzchim, but egla rufa, right, where we don't know who the murderer is, but Misharabba Rotzka Begolui, the murderers who killed people publicly, Begoli, Butla, Egla, Rufa, because now we can identify the murderer. People knew who the murderer was. Misharabu Noafim is they were Mavatel, Dashkos, Me Sotah. Tanarabanan, Vidnika, Ishme Avon. When do the waters of the Memorim have the effective power? That's only Bisman. Sha'ish Menuka mi Avon Amayim Bodkin Isha. Aino Ish Menuka mi Avon. If he's not innocent, then Aino Amayim Bodkin. The Omer, and the Pasuk further says in Hosea, Lo Efkod al Benosechem ki tiznena. I will not examine on account of your daughters because they commit harlotry. So my v'yomer, what is he adding here? V'chitem avon didei in debane b'nosei lo. You might say that the reason why the mayim are not bodek, they don't have the power to examine the wife, is because the sons were guilty of iniquity, of Avon. But you might think that the daughters did not affect the examination. Torah Rabbanon, Toshma, therefore we learned from this pasuk, when they commit adultery. And let's say a person had a relationship not with a married woman, which would be adultery, but with an unmarried woman, and that's the lesser sin. Is Tashma, take a look at the pasuk, Yihem im hazonos, Yifredu v'im akdeshos yizabechu. The men consort with harlots and sacrifice with prostitutes. So that's even a woman who's not an Ashes Ish. My ve'am lo yavin yilavet. What is meant by this pasuk? The end of this pasuk, that the people do not understand and will stumble. Amar Abelazar, Amar Lehem Navi LiYisrael, Im atem makpidim al atzmechem. You have to be careful with yourselves regard to morality, and if you will be, then mayim bodkim, let's just say. But in love, if you're not careful with regard to morality, then eina mayim bodkim, let's just say. Misharabu bali hanon is avsu hadinin. When people became pleasure seekers, then justice was perverted, miskalkalu amasim, and the deeds deteriorated. As Torah scholars became concerned with ease and comfort and pleasure, they did not invest the time and effort necessary to properly analyze court cases and questions of Allah that were brought before them. As a result, the decisions that they issued were poorly thought out and incorrect. Justice was perverted, and the deeds of the public who relied on this halachic ruling suffered. Hashem is not satisfied with the world. And if he's not pleased with the actions of the world, then terrible things will happen. Misharabu roe panim bedin. People who displayed favoritism in judgment and that increased batalosa guru, the command of you shall not tremble before any man at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, ceased to be practiced. Upasak lo sakiru. And the commandment, you shall not show favoritism in judgment, was discontinued. Ufarku ol shamayim, people removed the yoke of heaven, and asnu aleim ol basar v'dam. Instead, they were more interested in the yoke of flesh and blood. Misharabu lo chashay lechichos badin, those who whispered to the judges during judgment, is Rabba Charon Af Yisrael, that increased divine anger in Israel. When Istalka Shechina, the Shechina departed. Mishum Shenema Bekerev Elohim Yishpot. In the midst of judges, he judges. God stands in the divine assembly, namely in the nation of Israel, but only when the verdicts of the judges reflect his judgments, his with a capital H. Misharabu Achre Bitzam Libam Holech. the number of people increased about which the pasuk says their heart lusts for gain. And if they lust for gain, then all they want is physical gratification, and they will accept bribes. Rabu ha'omrim le'ra tov la'tov ra. Increase the number of people who say they're regarding evil, good, regarding good, evil. In other words, they begin to praise evildoers whose worldly success they consider praiseworthy. They denigrate Torah scholars and righteous people. Misharobu ha'omrim l'ra tov v'latov ra. Rabu hoy hoy ba'olam. This is a pasuk in Yeshaya Hanavi. Woe, woe, increased in the world. And this indicates that people, as a result of the fact that people praise evildoers, mankind will cry out, woe, in despair. When evildoers are praised, people seek to emulate them, and this causes misfortune to descend upon the world. Punishment upon the world. Sharo Moshe Arok, those who spit a far distance. Rabu Hayehirim. This is a symbol of arrogance. And now the Gemara has a discussion about arrogance. Nismatu atalmidim. The number of students decreased. HaTorah chozeres al lomdea. The Torah goes about searching for those who will study it. So I guess what the Gemara is saying here is that as a result of arrogance, the students are not seeking out Torah. Shemarichim lahashos esarok b'fiyah midas gaivahi gavosam v'gasi ruach nismato talmid l'fisha machmas gavosam ena mishamshim kol tzorkam. They're not mishamish talmid chacham v'lo chozrim al shmuah, so they don't bother reviewing their lessons. But Torah chozeres ulai timtza lomdeo misharo hayehirim hischilu b'nos Yisrael inosei liyehirim. The women were very impressed by these, arrogant men, and they started marrying them. Became she'ein dorei roa el lifnim, because they look at the outsides, the chitzonius. The Gemara says, "Eini, is this really so?" V'amar mar hayman demiayar, a person who is arrogant, afila inshik beisei lo makal, even his wife ultimately will be dissatisfied with him. Shenever pasuk Chavakuk gever yahir v'lo yinve. An arrogant man and his abode will not endure. Lo yinve, it will not endure. Afilu b'nove shalom. Even in his own nove, his own abode, the women are not fooled by the arrogance of their husband. So the Gemara answers me, Kara Kaftzal. First, initially, they're very impressed by the arrogance of these people, self-confidence and all that stuff, macho and all that stuff. But ultimately, they realize mitzal aleu, that the husbands are not really what they appear to be. And he become despised by them. Misharab matili malay al bale batim dayonim shemistakrim mikach shayunostim es malay schorosa l'sochrim shim karu. So they amassed a certain amount of merchandise and they appointed others sochrim, like middlemen, to sell it for them. And now the dayonim are like very much focused on making money. Is Rabba Shochad. They were so eager to make money that they were easily bribed. Vatoyas Mishpat, and they what's the word I was looking for? It's at the tip of my tongue. and they perverted. Oh, that's the word I was looking for. They perverted justice. Upaska tova, consequently, good conditions ceased. That bribery causes divine anger to descend upon the world. Misharabu makable tovascha, umachzike tovascha. When the number of judges increased, who would say to a litigant, I acknowledge the favor that you performed for me. I am beholden to you because of your favor. Rabu ish hayosher be'enov yaseh. Pasuk in Shoftim. Every man did what was right in his eyes. When people realized that the judges were favorably disposed to, they no longer feared the court's authority. They did as they pleased. Shfolim hugvahu vagvoim hushpalu. Lowly people were raised up, eminent people were brought low. Both were treated with equal regard. Since the masses were not in awe of people of eminence, they did not subject themselves to their authority. The distinction between eminent people and lowly people is no longer evident. Umalchusa azla v'nafla, and the Jewish kingdom deteriorated more and more. Misharabu tsarei ha'ayin, these are misers. V'torfei teref, grabbers of spoil, meaning robbers. Is Rabu ma'amtei alev v'koftzei yadayim l'havos. They increased the number of people who harden their hearts against the pleas of the needy, and tight-fisted people who refused even to lend money to the needy. V'avru al mashikosa b'torah, they violated the lav of Hisham l'chapen. Nason titein lo. Misharabu netuyos garn, women who walked with a high, they held their heads high. They stretched their necks forth. Umesakros einayim, a pasuk in Yeshaya, they winked with their eyes in a promiscuous manner. Rabu mayim amorim, there was more and more niuf, and therefore more and more waters, bitter waters. Elisha pasku, but at some point they discontinued the water because misharobu hanofen. Misharobu makabli matanos. The number of people who accepted gifts increased. Nismatu hayomim v'niskatzu hashanim. The days of people's lives decreased and the years were shortened. Because he who hates gifts will live. Pasuk in Mishlei, one who places his trust in Hashem to provide his sustenance does not accept the gifts of man, and is rewarded with long life. Misharobu zechuchei halev hasomchem al binosam v'yeino matim oznam l'shmoa mipi rabam l'dagdek b'shmoasam. So these are haughty-minded people. They think that they know everything. Is rabu machlokas b'Yisrael. That caused the number of disputes in matters of halacha to be increased in Israel. An arrogant person tends to place exaggerated confidence in his mental prowess. He does not listen carefully to his teacher, but relies on his own acumen to the extent that he's not interested in comprehending his teacher's lessons. He won't review his studies enough time. And all this is a result of the proliferation of haughtiness. Many disputes arose. The scholars had not properly understood what they had learned. They weren't mishamesh talmidei chachamim. Misharobu Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel shelo shimshu kol tzarkam, and the number of students of Shammai and Hillel did not serve their teachers, meaning they weren't mishamish, they didn't learn from them. Rabu machlokas b'Yisrael, this caused the number of disputes to increase in Israel. V'naseis Torah kishtei Torahs. It was almost as if there were two different Torahs. So this is the emphasis on the significance of Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. An aspiring posek must be well versed in the logic, the reasoning behind the opinions in the Mishnah, etc., etc. And this expertise is crucial, for Tanoi may appear to have similar views regarding one matter, but when the rationales are revealed, it is clear that they would disagree in another related matter. So you have to understand the underlying logic of the teachings of the Tanoim, and that requires Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. Misharabim al-Kablei Tzedakah Mina Ovdei Kochavim, we accepted charity from the idol worships, and that gave them, the idolaters, a certain schus. Yisrael lamala v'heim lamata. Then the idolaters became on high, and the Israelites low. Yisrael lifnim v'heim lachar. The idolaters were in the forefront, and Israel was in the back. Mishabeis Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yehuda is then the Eshkolos ceased. My Eshkolos, Omer Rab Yehuda, Omer Shmuel, Ish Shakol Bo. A person who possesses everything, in other words, all good traits. So precise Torah knowledge, with no confusion or doubt. And these are characters of wisdom. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Hever Hodoyas HaMaser. He put an end to the Vidui Maser, my timer. Why? Because he felt that the Vidui Maser was no longer true, it was false. Amar Rab Yossi, Rab Chanina, Lefisha Nosino So Ketikuna. They don't give Maser as mandated by the Torah. The Rachman Amar Diavi Lefiyim. The Torah said gives Maser Rishon to Lefiyim. The Anan. But since the days of Ezra Sofer, they gave the Maser to the Kohanim instead. And in the Maser confession, a person declares Asisi Hichol Asher Tzivisani. And in the Maser, which is in Parshas Kisov, it says V'gam Nesativ La Levi. And they weren't giving it to the Levi, they were giving it to the Kohen instead. And we'll just end with one last note. Since they gave the Maser Rish to the Kohen rather than to the Leviim, we cannot, the declaration of the Vidui Maser cannot be declared. There's an opinion of one Tana Yevamos that Maser Rishon can be given to the Kohen. However, Ezra instituted that Maser Rishon should be given to the Kohanim, and once Ezra instituted that Maser Rishon be given to the Kohanim, we cannot declare that Gam Nesativ LaLevi. In other words, we really didn't fulfill the Torah's command to give the Maser Rishon to the Levium, but rather we give them only to the Kohen. So that's in a sense a deviation from the simple meaning of the Vidui Maser. Okay, and then so here's where we're going to stop on the top of Memches Amud Aleph. And I appreciate that you were able to persevere. I mean, these long agaditas take more than just the hour that's allotted to us. Take this opportunity to wish you a great day.